Your hand if you thought the post office would be a contentious issue in the year 2020.
Everyone knows mail-in ballots are a disaster.
But even between President Trump threatening to withhold money from USPS and trucks hauling away mailboxes in Oregon, our local election officials say there's nothing to worry about here.
We've been doing this for more than 2 decades.
Elsewhere, it could be a very different story. An audit of Portland Public Schools has confirmed what they've known all along. There is an achievement gap between white students and students of color.
We're not asking for nothing more. We just want to be equal.
So how do we fix it? And a familiar sound returns to Oaks Park. It's not a roller coaster, but they are on wheels.
So nice to get out of the house.
Here's the story.
Hey guys, yeah, happy Friday. Seriously, happy Friday. I'm so happy. I feel like everyone I talk to just agrees that this week was so stressful. Like, it had it in for us at one point. I don't know what it was, like why that's the consensus, but I mean, whatever. It's over. I'm Maggie Vespa. Dan is off tonight. He's as unplugged as a person can be. I'm so happy for him. In fact, I think he just sent us a photo, right? There he is. Look at him. Look how good he looks. He's happy, he's tan. His jacket's even gotten bigger. It's like a normal size. He never looked more alive. Dan, we love it, man. Vacay looks so good on you. Enjoy your weekend. That's nice. Good times. We wish him well. All right, so hey, Dan's out, clearly, but living it up, as you can see. We're here, though. I mean, you can tweet at us. You can use the hashtag #HeyDan. It's so cheesy. You can email the story at kgw.com. You can send us your feedback. We seriously do want to hear from you. And we have, you might have noticed today, a lot to discuss in the news. So let's start the show. All right, our big story is about national politics and just how dependent it is about to become on the U.S. Postal Service, one of the few government agencies explicitly authorized by the U.S. Constitution with roots dating back to 1775. And its motto, by the way, in case you haven't seen it, is this, quote, "Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds." Sounds nice. Sounds whimsical, in fact. Problem is, that list of things that won't stop your trusty postal carriers fails to include a deadly global pandemic, a presidential election amid historically divisive times, and a president who says loudly and repeatedly that he doesn't trust USPS to handle said election without opening the door to massive corruption and fraud. Yeah. Granted, there is no evidence to substantiate the president's fears. Zero evidence. In fact, we in Oregon and Washington know that more than most. We know that how reliable mail-in voting is, and we'll get to all that. But first, let's kind of reset here, because at its heart, basically the issue is this. Since COVID-19 brought the United States to a virtual standstill, the issue of mail-in voting has come front and center. Especially after this photo started going viral yesterday out of North Portland, a white truck being loaded up with mailboxes. And the post office confirmed that these boxes were indeed being removed. A total of 3 in Portland and 27 were taken out of Eugene. The post office said they were only taking out boxes basically that were superfluous, meaning they were next to other boxes. They didn't need all of them there. But people were quick to think that something fishy was going on, because that happened against this backdrop. President Trump this week told Fox Business he is refusing Democrats' demands for billions of dollars for the Postal Service, and he's doing that because of mail-in voting.
Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. If they don't get those 2 items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting because they're not equipped to have it.
3 vaccines are in the final stage of clinical.
President Trump has made no secret of his disdain for mail-in voting. He regularly claims, with zero evidence, that it is riddled with fraud. And again, it's not. In fact, both Oregon and Washington's Republican secretaries of state say it's very safe. But what about in states that haven't been doing it for decades? That's a key caveat that people argue. What would it mean for new states to get into the mail-in voting game? Well, this week we actually learned about a letter sent to secretaries of state across the U.S. from USPS, and it warned that states that the post office will not be able to fulfill all expected requests for mail-in ballots and that there won't be enough time for ballots to be requested, completed, and returned before the November 3rd presidential election. This on top of a Vice News report that says the post office is deactivating mail sorting machines across the country without any official explanation. Needless to say, there are plenty of reasons to be concerned. And that's why election officials in Oregon and Washington who are used to this routine are adjusting. And then at the same time, your politicians, your Oregon politicians, are turning up the heat on President Trump to basically help the Postal Service instead of hurting it. Here's Kyle Laboshi.
The U.S. Postal Service has warned election officials in Oregon, Washington, and many other states of potential mail-in ballot delays. In this July letter sent to Oregon's Secretary of State, the Postal Service suggested it may not be able to meet deadlines for delivering last-minute mail-in ballots. In response to the warning letter, Secretary of State Bev Clarno said election officials will continue to work with the Postal Service and monitor any potential impact to both the mailing out of ballots to voters and the return of ballots.
We've been doing this for more than 2 decades, and we have an excellent relationship with the post office. And we're going to make sure that the system works for November.
Tim Scott, Multnomah County Director of Elections, said his office may consider changing the recommended deadline for putting ballots in the mail. By encouraging people to send them in earlier, it would ensure ballots arrive on time.
And if we have to adjust our messaging to account for service changes within the Postal Service, we will do that.
The potential delays come as the Postal Service is undergoing cuts to its operations. Postal workers complained processing equipment has been removed, and there are new restrictions on overtime, slowing delivery.
Where it's deliberately being left sitting in the processing center, sitting in a dock, not being taken to the stations, or being left in a station day after day, night after night, and not coming out to the American people. At
a press conference, Oregon Senators Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley argued the slowdown mail service is political. President Trump has repeatedly attacked vote-by-mail operations.
His effort to underfund the post office is all about making it hard to deliver ballots.
On social media, many neighbors were alarmed after seeing this image of someone removing blue mailboxes in Portland. A postal spokesperson said 4 collection bins have been removed from Portland and 27 from Eugene because of declining mail volume, and there are other mailboxes nearby.
All right, so Kyle Laboshi joining us now. So Kyle, let's start with that meeting between Governor Brown, Senator Wyden, and then the head of the Oregon National Guard. I mean, what do we know about that?
This is really interesting. It was during the press conference, and Senator Wyden mentioned it, that he'd met with the governor along with state military officials to discuss how the Oregon National Guard could play a part in ensuring that vote-by-mail works and works efficiently in November. We kind of asked him for additional details. He didn't give any specifics. He said there's no formal plan in place, but it was interesting that they even had these talks in the first place.
It was a really interesting mention. And then at the same time, something else that sort of caught our eye and caught your eye, I know, was the sort of change in messaging that might be coming from Multnomah County elections. I mean, what are we learning about that?
Yeah, and I asked about that. Basically, as they explained it, getting people enough time to get those ballots turned in. So oftentimes when you get your mail-in ballot, on the envelope it says return by this day, or put it in the mailbox by this day to ensure that it gets to the elections department by the deadline. Typically that's about 5 days. What they're looking at is the potential to expand that, maybe 6 or 7 days. So really what it is it's just the messaging to the voters to say, listen, to make sure that this vote counts, get it in by this day, which will be in all likelihood much earlier than previous.
All right, really interesting to see how this is playing out. Kyle Laboshi, thank you so much. Hey, here's something we think is worth your time. We usually plug local Portland journalists in this segment, but tonight we're going to tip our hats to the big guys. This week, NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel got really personal. His 4-year-old son, Henry, has a severe genetic neurological disorder, and pre-pandemic, school was the place where he got a lot of his therapy, and then he got to interact with other kids. It was really valuable. Well, now, obviously, that's all gone. An online school, for him, Engel says, is a disaster. He says without in-person therapy and interaction, his son's condition is getting a lot worse. He shakes more often. He's more easily upset. And we're recommending this story in large part because Engel's story represents so many other families across the country. And case in point, 9-year-old Caroline, a sweet, funny kid who lives in Clackamas County. Caroline is diagnosed with autism, and with Cree-de-Shaw syndrome, which basically means she's missing part of her 5th chromosome. As a result, Caroline is nonverbal, and she benefits from all kinds of therapy, most of which she gets in school. But her mom, Sarah Tabor, wrote into the story saying that Richard Engel's son, like Richard Engel's son, Caroline right now is really suffering. She doesn't just miss her friends like most kids, and she's not just struggling to do homework like most kids. She flat out can't go to school via Zoom, and she can't get therapy, physical, occupational, speech, and so on via Zoom. On top of that, Tabor is a full-time educator herself, so she, like a lot of parents right now, is working from home. And she hoped with the state's, Oregon's fall guidelines, she'd get some guidance, basically get some help. Even just going to school part-time with a small number of kids for Caroline would make a huge difference. Well, no dice. Regarding students with special needs, the Oregon Department of Education in recent guidelines says limited in-person instruction can be offered on skills that are difficult to teach through distance learning and with students that are unable to effectively access instruction through distance learning. Tabor points out the problem with that clause is that it gives districts the option, but it doesn't require that they offer in-person learning. And she worries district to district, kids like Caroline will be left behind, even if districts and teachers are doing their best. Because while online learning is hard for all kids, for children with special needs, it's pretty much impossible.
We were getting emails with, activities via PowerPoint that the teacher would send and that the therapist would send different exercises and things to do. But just none of that is realistic, for what our world is. You can see that technology is not awesome because it's more of a attentional tool than a work tool. And then trying to communicate with those specialists and therapists via Zoom or email just isn't enough for her, and it isn't going to cut it.
What's your fear?
Regression. That's always our fear with our kiddos. She learns a skill and it can be there one day and gone the next, and without someone working with her all the time, you just don't know what's going to stick and what's not, and what opportunities are going to be lost.
All right, so we reached out to several local districts, including Salem-Keizer, Clackamas Public Schools, where Caroline goes, and Portland Public Schools, and so far, Tabor's fears are correct. None of them have said that they'll be doing in-person learning for kids like Sarah in any capacity anytime soon, just citing fears over the pandemic, logical fears. Portland Public Schools says they'll do it when it's safe, but they can't tell us when that might be. We reached out to the state, and officials with the Department of Education say they stand by their guidance. Tabor again says online learning cannot work for her daughter, and she will keep advocating for her kid, but she's running out of time. We'll keep you posted. In the meantime, I just mentioned Portland Public Schools, and at the same time, they are dealing with another stark reality, one that frankly they knew existed. But now there's proof. A recent audit shows in Portland Public Schools, white kids are way more likely to succeed than their classmates of color. Here's Christelle Kumwe.
Equity in education, a call for change at a July march in Northeast Portland.
We need equal opportunity for black kids also in the education system. A lot of times they get pushed to the side. We're not asking for nothing more. We just want to be equal.
A 2019 audit found deep racial disparities in student achievement in Portland public schools. 21% of black students met or exceeded standards for language arts compared to 74% of white students. The achievement gap is even greater in math. Only 11% of black students met the standards for math compared to 60% of white students.
Portland, and Portland Public Schools specifically, has had an achievement gap for over 50 years.
Kali Thorne-Ladd is the co-founder and executive director of Kairos PDX, an organization focused on educational equity.
How do we do this differently? How do we do this better so that we yield different outcomes? We are never going to get different results if we keep doing the same thing.
She says there's a long list of what needs to be done. At the top is a greater level of accountability for equity.
We have over $1 billion that goes into education with no accountability really for outcomes that are more equitable. How are the dollars being tied towards children truly improving in their outcomes.
She says student assessments for younger students are key to getting them back on track if they've fallen behind.
We need to see more diversity within the workforce. Implicit bias is real.
A 2016 study from Yale University shows when a preschool teacher and child are the same race, the teacher has more empathy for the student. The study also found teachers tend to expect more challenging behaviors from boys who are black than from other students. This may account for higher rates of suspension and expulsion.
Diversity matters. Also, training that is focused on self-reflective protocols and understanding how implicit bias shows up, how to change behavior, understanding neuroscience of learning. All of those things I think are important to begin to shift the system.
The report also says large gaps in language fluency, economic status, and disability contributed to these disparities. PPS says it is committed to closing those gaps. Christelle Kumwe, KGW News.
All right, and we reached out to Portland Public Schools to ask about the breakdown in diversity among teachers, and they tell us 6% are black, 8% are Hispanic, and 75% of PPS teachers are white.
And they have the unique opportunity to do that by acknowledging and exposing racism.
In June, she took the protests over systemic racism to Adidas's doorstep. And now, the New York Times has given her a national platform. Fire season has arrived in full force in the Gorge, and the Vault has a somber reminder of just how bad things can get. When the story continues. Hey guys, welcome back to The Story. I'm Maggie Vespa. I'm in for Dan while he's on vacation, and we know the change is scary, so the hashtag is still the same. We're going to keep some things the same. It's hashtag HeyDan. You can reach out with that on Twitter. You can email thestory@kgw.com. Send us your questions. Leave us your comments. We read some of your feedback at the end of the show. And now we want to talk about another work of journalism that we think is worth your time. We're doubling up on the Worth Your Times tonight. It's about a protest in Portland, and it's gaining some national attention as the subject of today's edition of the New York Times podcast, The Daily. And it's not just the protest that you're thinking of. It's not the one that we've been covering so much. This is a consistent, quiet, daily protest in front of Adidas. Multiple employees have attended. This is video of them protesting from June. One woman started all of this. Her name is Julia Bond. She's black, and she works at Adidas's Portland headquarters as an assistant designer. And she says the company hasn't done nearly enough to address and stop systemic racism in its midst. Bond has been out in front of her employer, protesting every day for 2 months, and she talked about it to Michael Barbaro on The Daily today. Here's what she told us early on back in June.
This brand touches the world, right, with its product, and we put clothes and shoes on everybody. And I see the potential of this brand to create lasting change and to really be a leader in this industry and to really, stand for what's right. And they have the unique opportunity to do that by acknowledging and exposing racism.
So Adidas eventually pledged that 30% of its new hires would be black or Latinx, and it would donate $20 million to social justice causes over the next 4 years. But Julia kept up her protests because she felt Adidas never acknowledged its own racist work environment or apologized for it. And in her interview on The Daily, she went into detail about some of the racism she's witnessed or experienced, which included people making inappropriate comments about her hair, telling her that her skin wasn't dark enough to be really considered black. And then one time she saw a picture of a Confederate flag being included on an inspiration board for designers. And as her protest continues into its second month, she says the company is starting to be less and less understanding than they were earlier, and they may start requiring employees to use PTO if protests go beyond lunch, and that would be a change. But it was an exchange that Julia had with her mom that gives us her quote, our quote of the day. Julia said her mom was concerned that her daily protests might get her blacklisted from the industry, and Julia told her, quote, "If I told you every day something that happened to me at this brand, from off-kilter comments about color, things like that, it would be all we talk about."
We reached out to both Julia and Adidas today to see if they'd like to talk to us about this update and this article and the podcast. We haven't yet heard back. We'll follow up if and when we do. But you can listen to Julia's full interview on The Daily wherever you get your podcasts. And by the way, if you watch our other newscasts, which hopefully you do, you will know we've got one of the first big wildfires of the season here in Oregon. It's burning in the gorge near Mosier. It's threatening a lot of homes, and it's already destroyed at least one that we know of. And we, sadly, know how bad fire season can be here in the Pacific Northwest, and we're all hoping that doesn't happen this year because everyone is already dealing with a lot in 2020. But we thought we would look back in the KGW Vault at this day in history when arguably the worst wildfire Oregon's ever seen flared up. The Tillamook burn first broke out 87 years ago on August 14, 1933. It was actually a series of catastrophic fires in the northern Coast Range that reignited for years until 1951. The worst one broke out near Gales Creek, west of Forest Grove, during a logging operation. In 10 days, it burned more than 40,000 acres, about the size of the 2017 Eagle Creek fire. But then it just exploded. In the next 24 hours, it spread to 240,000 acres, creating a firestorm. It actively burned until fall when the rain started to put it out. But it torched so much land that those dead and dried out trees became a powder keg that reignited year after year. When the fires finally stopped, a huge restoration project began. People planted more than 72 million seedlings over the next 20 years. And in 1973, Governor Tom McCall designated the former burn area as the Tillamook State Forest. We love the KGW Vault, and we know you do too. We see your emails about it, so please keep sending us your ideas with the hashtag HeyDan, or you can send them via email. And speaking of, we're responding to some of your comments after the break. Hey guys, a lot of comments coming in about Kyle's story on the U.S. Postal Service, and I kind of want to contrast two of them just to show you how we can air one story and get two very different takes. Dan wrote via email, not Hey Dan, but a different Dan. He wrote, "I'm wondering how legal it is for Trump to use a government agency, the USPS, for his own good." Obviously sarcasm there. And then the next one down, Pat wrote, "Why are you pushing the false narrative that President Trump is keeping people from mail-in voting?" He goes on to say the Postal Service has been struggling financially for years. What we did was play a soundbite that said of the president saying that he's withholding money from the Postal Service, and we got two completely different takes as to what we may or may not have been trying to imply by telling you what's been happening tied to the Postal Service. So that's 2020 for you. Thank you for watching, everybody. And before we go, excuse me, we're going to turn to, that's my bad, a familiar sound that's returned to Oaks Park. Not roller coasters, a different kind of roller. My bad, everybody. I don't want to forget this. Here is photojournalist John Gudgel to finish us out tonight.
What we're doing here, we're out at Oaks Park, and we are doing outdoor skating at Oaks Park. We wanted to make a way for people to get outside, have a good time, socially distanced, healthy. And this is like the most beautiful amusement park. It's vintage. Jump the track! So you have 43 acres out here at Oaks. It's very clean, it's very well maintained. It's just beautiful. The pavement is fantastic. You can skate around the roller coasters, check things out.
So nice to get out of the house.
They're skating somewhere that you've never been allowed to skate too.
I've really been missing it because I've been skating. Right before this, we were skating 4 times a week maybe.
Guys, can we get people at least 6 feet away from each other? So even though they have to skate socially distanced, they're just really excited to see other skaters.
And I really like that we could see all the people because we haven't seen them in a really long time.
See some friends, even if at a distance.
For a lot of the families, it's also something they can do together.
What do you think? You think she's going to get the hang of it?
And there's gear here. If anybody needs gear, everybody's welcome to skate, and they've made gear available for everyone.
Yeah, I can't do it.
We do not require protective gear, but I highly recommend it. If you have your own stuff, like helmets and bike helmets, things like that, wear those, bring those. And then also, if you're coming down, especially when it's going to be hot, bring some ice water with you. Put on sunblock.
Oh, any type of roller skater, brand new, experienced, derby players that are missing roller derby. We all play roller derby. Figure skaters, anybody. Your whole family should come out here. It's a great place.
Yeah, we're really just trying to make an environment for people to have a really good time.